is the best. I like when things are on 87 times. All right, the entirety of the day. All right, ready?
Yeah, we're ready.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Soccer Wise. David Goss, Tom Bogert with you for this one as we run a little recap. U.S. Open Cup, Canadian Championship semifinals. Tom, you're back into your wheelhouse with another transfer window you just invented so you could have more to do over the course of the year. And I'm getting ready to go see the tennis, as the gentlemanly and gentlewomanly people say. So we did a little bit of an earlier record today so that we could get it in, so that I could get 12 hours of live tennis in over the course of the day. I am going to be on the grounds of the U.S. Open, on the outer courts, just smelling and tasting the experience. It's the greatest sporting event in the world. That's what people say.
You're so cultured, bro. I want to just riff for 3 minutes making fun of you for being high society, but like I'm really jealous. Like the U.S. Open is something that I really want to go to. I only lived in the city for 1 year, and then I was in Hoboken, which is right across the river, for a few years after that, and neither the pandemic happened, and I never made it there, and I'm very disappointed in myself for it. But Goss, do you ever listen to Pablo Torre Finds Out? It's a really good podcast.
Yes.
He did one last year about the U.S. Open that apparently there is one specific court 17, that smelled like weed all of the time, and they did an investigation into that, and apparently it has improved, and they did boots on the ground journalism, and they made a change in the world, and now it smells like all the other courts. So just want you to be aware of that. You let me know what it smells like.
I will give you an update. It wouldn't be shocking to me because Court 17 is on the edge of the grounds, which means people outside the grounds, their waft would come in to Court 17. I'm a big fan of Court 17 alongside the Grandstand. It's one of my two favorite courts at the U.S. Open.
Didn't know I walked into a wheelhouse here.
I will be there a lot today. I've already got my schedule locked in. I'm already stoked about it. And we are excited about all of the people that joined us yesterday for our happy hour last night, in through the first half of the Seattle LAFC U.S. Open Cup game. So thank you to all of you out there who are our MVP level supporters. Thank you to everyone who came for that one. We appreciate Justin teaching us, educating us about Hard Mountain Dew and the potential that exists there for Tom to accomplish two things he wants in life, both drinking and drinking Mountain Dew. He can now fuse those things without actually having to do any extra work in making a Mountain Dew cocktail. And it was a big moment for you, and I feel disgusting just talking about it still.
Yeah, the context here is that for our happy hour, instead of having an adult beverage, I figured it'd be fun to just have a radioactive colored Mountain Dew, and that sparked about 25 minutes of conversation about Hard Mountain Dew, and had a huge smile on my face the entire time, and Goss was just absolutely horrified and questioning every decision of our friendship and of our partnership on Soccer Wise here, and I enjoyed every part of that too. How uncomfortable you were.
I will say, so Lori Lindsay, who has come on our show on the NWSL side, she's one of the Apple TV broadcasters, one of the big people that covers NWSL. The first time we met, she rolled in with like a 32 ounce of Mountain Dew into the studio.
Are you kidding me?
We were doing I think it was a night of Open Cup games. We had never met before, and I was like, I'm not gonna lie, that's disgusting. I have a specific I'm not a huge soda drinker, but like, fine, whatever, do what you do, I don't care. Mountain Dew specifically feels more gross than other sodas.
Yes.
So then when you made it blue,
yeah,
and then you talked about throwing alcohol in there, it felt a little bit much for me. But to each their own. God's working on all of us. We're all finding our own path in the world.
Can I just say, Lori Lindsay being the one that came in with a 32-ounce Mountain Dew is such a shock to me.
The fittest human being you've ever met. Yeah, 100%.
And
I think was on American Ninja Warrior, and didn't even train for it, just is capable of it.
She's the best, man. That is awesome. That makes me like her even more. And I didn't know that was possible. She's the best.
And Lori was on the call with Chris Whittingham for the U.S. Open Cup semifinal. LAFC against Seattle. We'll dig into that one. Canadian Championship. The Is it the European transfer window that's closing, or is it the global trend? Like how? What term am I supposed to use? Is Azerbaijan's window still open? Is the Philippines window still open?
That's how I blanket it. I'll just say most, like the top 5 leagues close on Friday.
Okay.
And then there's a couple hangnails.
So all the money
after that.
turns off.
Yeah, like Belgium is, I think, September 5th. But like in years past, like this happened, like Turkey's extends a little bit, but if you're in European competitions, I don't know what it is last year, but in years prior, it was like one day after. So even if like Turkey's window was open for an extra week after England's, like Fenerbahce and Besiktas, like whatever teams were playing in Europe, still had to adhere by the normal. Like that, like when Diego Rossi went from LAFC to Fenerbahce, like that was a thing. Like I was like, oh, like this is like they don't know if they're gonna be able to get it done in time. I'm like, why? There's 6 days left in Turkey's window. Like tell him to take his time. It's like no,
because
like,
they have to register the player for you. Got it. Okay.
So like technically, if they didn't do that in time, he could still be registered to play in the Turkish league, but couldn't play in European competitions until the winter, right? So all to say is your confusion is fair. Mexico's is open for, I believe, an extra week, and then there's a couple random ones like that. And I think Argentina was supposed to close 2 weeks ago, and they just decided to keep it open. I don't.
Leave it open, man. Open door policy. Stay open to the world. In all of that, we will discuss, of course, Tanner Tessmann. Probably the best place kicker in Ligue 1 now. Probably the best in all of France with his ability off the tee. And now he is going to be a part of things in Ligue 1. So we'll talk about that and some other moves, some other stuff that you're working on in our ice cream shop. And then it's a pretty interesting weekend of MLS action. Obviously, we're getting into playoff push and all of that, but there's some big games coming up that I'm excited to talk about. So we'll dig into that as well before we get out of here for your Labor Day weekend in the United States, everywhere else. I don't know. Hopefully you all took off Monday as well. Let's start with Open Cup, and let's start out at Starfire. It was an incredible atmosphere, as it always is for Seattle Open Cup games. It is the coolest thing, I think, in like American soccer lore right now, that Seattle hosts these games here, no matter the stakes. Like in a semifinal, they're still hosting it in a place where you're just looking at the evergreen trees hanging over the goals, and it feels like anyone could just wander in off the street and watch this game. Obviously a place of great lore. Clint Dempsey tore up a notebook at this field. There's been some huge Open Cup moments because it's a meaningful competition for this club and their history, and it was not a good one for Seattle. Yeah. LAFC coming off the Leagues Cup loss. They win 1-0 off a Dennis Bouanga penalty kick in about the 82nd minute off a handball from a set piece. It was a bogus shot that went off, I believe, Alex Roldan's hand, and then the penalty kick called, upheld, and then Bouanga puts it in the corner to get the 1-0 win. We did a little bit about LAFC's struggles to get over the line on Tuesday. You cannot deny, one, how monumental this victory was. Like, slightly rotated lineup, coming off that experience, playing in a final on Sunday. You now travel to play an away game in this atmosphere. To be able to not just get over the line, they were by far the better team throughout this game. They dominated this game. There wasn't really moments where it felt like they would lose. You have Morris put it in the back of the net in an offside position late to tie it. That's the closest Seattle ever looked, though. Like, this was gutsy from LAFC, and I think it was a big moment for their season.
Yeah, I agree for sure. And now they're hosting another final. So we go back to talking earlier in the week about how disappointing it is that LAFC are losing in finals, or, oh, you can't beat Columbus Crew on the road. Well, they're in another final, and that is worth celebrating. They get to host it. They're going to be the favorite against Sporting Kansas City. And, like, gutsy is the right word. Like, that was a pretty big letdown, is probably unfair, but, like, they put a lot into that Leagues Cup final. It was a super intense game, and obviously super disappointing for that team to lose. And then they go from Columbus to Seattle to go play an Open Cup semifinal at Starfire, not at Lumen Field, and against what should be a very motivated, very hungry Seattle Sounders team to exact some sort of revenge from getting waxed in the Leagues Cup quarterfinal by LAFC a week earlier or whatever it was. And as you said, like, LAFC was a better team. They were deserved to go through. There was a couple moments in the first half where Seattle scrambled really well defensively, but, like, again, this was LAFC's game. LAFC, they rotated a bit. They didn't look like they just played a super intense final a few days and then traveled cross country a few days before. And, like, I feel like I'm saying similar things about LAFC like time and time again, but like I don't want it to be lost that this is abnormal. This shouldn't be expected. This was such a spot for a letdown for like a oh like we could make 100 excuses for why they didn't show up for this game or why Seattle got through, right? And like it just didn't apply. And LAFC get through and it's super impressive and they still have a chance to add to their trophy cabinet and they have a really great chance to do so at home against Sporting Kansas City in the final next month.
Through about 55 minutes of this game, I checked, LAFC were at 60% possession on the road, against this Seattle team, as you said, that would be pretty motivated for this one. You look at the rotation for LAFC, and there are not a lot of teams that can rotate the pieces that they can rotate to bring in a Tim Tillman, who has been in the national team conversation, probably shouldn't have been, but he's still up there as he would be a starter for pretty much any MLS team. Kike Oliveira didn't start in the Leagues Cup final. He comes on. Obviously, Kai Kamara has been very good this year. Campos got the start in this one. So they have the ability to do this that other teams don't. There's a few things going on here. One is we have to compliment LAFC and their ability to make these finals. Like that, I said it about Philly, and I feel the same about LAFC, not because they're in the same situation. Philly obviously spend less than LAFC, and they've been hamstrung in other ways and continue to perform. LAFC have not been hamstrung in the same ways or have chosen themselves to do it, but they've continued to perform in big moments, and they've continued to make all these finals. That is like alone impressive. We have to talk about Seattle here and say at some point they are who they said they were. They are 5th or 6th in the West. That puts them 12th or 13th in Major League Soccer. They are, in our minds, one of the biggest teams in MLS. They have not been that team for 3 years now. And at some point, we have to give that up in saying, like, oh, how tough a win is it at Seattle? Maybe it's not that tough a win at Seattle anymore. Not like that's not the knock to LAFC. That's like we have to accept Seattle's place in this league at some point and stop trying to push them into, well, if they get in, they can make a run because you never want to play Seattle. That hasn't been true now since the 2021 CCL.
Yeah, I think this is what we were talking about on Tuesday, like when we did the sports radio topic of who's this game mean more for. It was very clearly Seattle to me in that, like, you cannot fake or feign to be in this tier if you consistently cannot beat LAFC. And, like, on this day, like, again, like, I think LAFC were the better team, but, hey, they get a penalty, they score. Like, it could have theoretically went either way because that can happen a lot in one-off games. But, like, again, what is this, 10 games in a row they can't beat LAFC? I don't have a ton more to say. Like, no, you're right. Like, they are very clearly in that second tier. And, like, this game for Seattle against Portland that we're going to talk about later that's coming up on the weekend, that's low-key a pretty big game for, well, like, it's always a big game, but, like, Seattle kind of have to win one of these big games at some point soon, right? Like, so I'm totally with you. Like, this isn't a contender, but, like, I didn't think that they were last week. Like, nothing last night changed my mind. And so maybe, like, I'm not the right person to ask about this just because I just didn't think that they were this team. I think that they're, in a one-game sample size, like, anything can happen, particularly in MLS. But, like, it would take a whole lot for them to advance even a couple rounds, let alone to MLS Cup.
The other thing I walked away from this game is I think LAFC are the best team in the Western Conference. I think they're favorites in the West. I think they might be the 4th best team in the East. There's a clear gap between the two conferences, and I think that's where you walk away from a week in which LAFC lose to Columbus for the second time in a final in 9 months, and you say, okay, this is their standing in this league, and then they go and pretty handily or easily beat Seattle in this moment in a semifinal on the road. And sort of how do you match those two things is they're sort of two different leagues they're playing in. They're two different setups. The Columbuses, Miamis, and Cincinnati's of the world are in one space, and I don't think the Galaxy are in that conversation. I don't think anyone in the West is in that conversation. And with LAFC's inability to beat those teams in big moments, they have now pushed themselves below that. So there's no one in the West, I think, that gets into that conversation. Fortunately for them, the way the league is set up, it doesn't matter. They only need to win one game, and the possibility is they could do it at home, or the Galaxy could do it at home if they made it to a final because it's so tough to get out of the East. But that is something that I'm going to be watching over these last few weeks, is sort of to see that gauge of where these two conferences stand and where the hierarchy of these two conferences stand. Because we get the question all the time. I think I did a long thing about We had a mailbag question, which if you want to be a part of the mailbag, join the Patreon. You get into the Discord, you get there, where someone asked me to match up every single team, East versus West, in their standings and play a playoff match and see which conference would win more. It's tough for me to say it wouldn't be the East right now. Like, even as you dig down into it and you go and look at Orlando in 7th, Charlotte in 6th, NYCFC in 5th. On the flip side, you've got Portland, Vancouver, and Seattle in those spots. Like, you might take an Eastern Conference sweep there in those matchups, and that's ignoring the fact that the top 4 are a clear victory for the East right now. And I think the 3 Supporter Shield favorites or pushers are going to be in the Eastern Conference coming up. And I think you saw that this week. You saw the difference basically through the, let's say, transitive property of LAFC playing in both of those setups and playing in both of those games. And Seattle now left to play for is just the regular season and their chance to try and make one last run with this. Pedro de la Vega came off the bench, wasn't able to make the difference. It's a directionless team right now, especially in that final third. And so there's still strength down the spine, as we said. They only concede 1 off a penalty, but never looked like winning, had no big chances in this game, a lower XG. It's a tough performance for them in this big moment, as it was for Indianapolis, Indy 11. I want to apologize for trying to make this exciting. I want to apologize for cursing you and for giving you the David Goss special. This is what all my teams do in these big moments. After, I believe, 2 hour and 44-minute weather delay, this game kicked off in Kansas City between Indy 11 and Sporting KC. Johnny Russell scored 14 minutes later. SKC had 70% possession in the first half. Augie Williams had 1 look, but otherwise, Indy 11 struggled to complete passes. They struggled to push SKC's offensive shape where they wanted it, and SKC scored the second in the 35th minute. And this game was just over, Tom. And we talked about SKC coming out of the Orlando game. They look the best they've looked all year, and Indy 11 just did not look up for this big moment.
Yeah, I mean, look, it was a second-tier team playing a top-division team. Again, you would say this in England, Spain, Germany, and Mexico, Argentina, Brazil, right? Like, it's no disrespect for Indy 11, but, like, this is how you should expect the game to play out if you're supporting Kansas City. So, good for them for doing it early, and, like, the longer these games go at 0-0, the more doubt, the more pressure, the more, like, what's going on? Could they get a goal? No, my God, they have a corner kick. Could this really be happening? And that kind of starts to snowball. So well done to SKC for getting it done early. And, like, you see the quality of Johnny Russell. He still has those moments, man. He's still a super fun player to watch. Yeah. Like, when it all kind of comes together like that. That was an awesome goal that he scored. And again, like, that's the difference between a designated player winger, or I don't know if he's technically still a DP, but you get my point, right? Versus a second-tier team. Like, that's a special moment. That wasn't a pattern of play. That wasn't an overwhelming team move. That was, 22 yards out, Johnny Russell has a free space. He's going to take a touch and score. Like, well done to SKC. Like, they did what they needed to do. They didn't leave any questions. It wasn't a difficult game. It was pretty ho-hum, and, like, they passed this test with flying colors. And again, like, a game that they should win, a game that they should have handled pretty easily, but should have does not always translate to it does, particularly for the Sporting Kansas City season. So kudos where kudos are due.
I went to the Soccer-Wise depth charts, and Johnny Russell is no longer a designated player. Radoja is, along with Shallowy and Alan Pulido. Pulido got the start in this one, which was good for this team. As you said, this team has match winners. They've got talent. It is all about their defensive ability and their defensive shape. Daniel Shallowy, I think, scored his first goal in 3 months on the weekend, and then SKC was able to turn around and do it once again in this match, which is obviously huge. Then on Wednesday night, with LAFC's victory, Sporting Kansas City qualified for the CONCACAF Champions Cup in 2025 because LAFC have already qualified via Leagues Cup. With Seattle losing and KC making it to the final, they automatically received what is now the open spot, because LAFC, even if they were to win the final, would not take up that spot. So Sporting Kansas City back where they belong, baby. Back with the big dogs, getting ready for a big Toluca match in which they'll lose 7-0 and maybe get to see Kike Oliveira.
Yeah, they will see Kiki Oliveira in September.
True. That is true. They will see him in the U.S. Open Cup final. It will be, we believe, September 24th or 25th. It will be at BMO in LA. So LAFC, the chance to host a final and try and rewrite this history. It'll be their 7th final, I believe, in the last 5 years. They have only won one of them. That was MLS Cup at home. This is probably as good a chance as they've had besides that, to be able to have your fans, your supporters, and you're playing a team in Kansas City that currently is not a playoff team, is a big moment. For SKC, things trending in the right direction. Logan Ndembe got his first start, which is a big moment. Danny Rosero back from injury as well. I mentioned Polito getting the start. So a lot of their injured pieces coming back. If you had to pick here, Tom, do they make another run like last year and sneak into the playoffs?
No, I just don't see it. Like, I feel bad, like, going super negative after, what should be a super positive day, super positive week. Sporting Kansas City gets to the Open Cup final. But, like, I'm just going to answer the question honestly. No, I don't think this team is very good. And no, I don't think that they're going to make the playoffs.
I don't think it's that negative because I think it's the truth, and I think it's definitely the reality that they're living in. Looking at their run-in towards the end of the year, their next 2 games, they go to Red Bull in Seattle. They play Colorado and Minnesota. They head to St. Louis, and then they finish up with LAFC at home and Dallas on the road. I mean, if you're bad, everyone is good compared to you, so there are no easy games, and that's just like the reality. Last year was a surprise, and then last year we came out of it, and everyone said, oh, this is who they are. Like, this is the team. It's Johnny Russell. It's Alan Pulido. It's a team that controls the game, that has multiple goal-scoring options. This is Sporting Kansas City, and the first half of the year was sort of the anomaly. You can't say that anymore. Now, over the course of 18 months, they've played poorly for 14 of them. They've played well for 4. You have to take the numbers there and say that this is a team that it is outside of a playoff spot in Major League Soccer, and now they would have to go on a crazy run to get in once again. So I'd be surprised if they did it. If they win Open Cup, it's their 5th Open Cup win. It would tie them for first with some other, legendary clubs. I'm struggling to say I don't think it saves the season when I would say that for a lot of teams because they've done it before, similar to, I think, what I'm about to talk about with Vancouver. It's a better year to have won a trophy for this club, but it just feels like nothing's changing with this team as they struggle. And I don't know how to put that together with, but they're going to win one of the available trophies to them.
Yeah, so I was about to ask you, like, does this make the season a success if they were to beat LAFC in the final? And you've kind of indicated no, right?
Yes.
That's your answer?
Yes.
Correct.
That is
so
my answer.
I would lean yes, just because, like, again, I totally agree with all of your points. Like, this, if they win against LAFC, that doesn't mean things are fixed for next year. It doesn't mean that everything is perfect and is going to be great. But what it does mean is you want hardware, even in negative season in the league play, in Leagues Cup as well. I know that they got out of the group, but 2 out of 3 teams get out of the group, then they got murdered by Columbus. All that, I think, is all true. But the way I would view the season, if you come away with a trophy, I think it's a success. And I might sound hypocritical because I don't know if that's really the case for Canadian Championship, while, like, that, like, just based on the math. If it's a 1 out of 3 chance, I think it's a little bit different. And again, you could point to that there was 8 senior MLS teams in this competition this year. So yes, it was watered down, the Open Cup, than it normally is. But I don't know. I just think that winning a trophy and winning this trophy is what, like, makes the season, like, even calling it like a success, it feels like strong. But
Yeah.
I would take winning a trophy and missing the playoffs than finishing 7th, getting bounced in the first round, and not doing anything in cup competitions because, like, cool, you finished 7th in the West. That's sweet. Like, enjoy your first round exit.
Yeah. Kavincho's in the chat right now trying to muster that energy. Any Sporting Kansas City fans out there, let us know what you think. Let us know your reactions. I mean, this is a nice other thing to think about because now you've got a month leading up into a final to be excited, to be focused on. You play that final and kind of straight into decision day pretty much. So maybe that's enough to sort of change the vibe around this group. And then you go into next year with a CONCACAF spot. But I think the frustrations we were getting from Sporting fans earlier in the year, mainly being that Peter Vermees has been in control of every aspect of this club. It's a club that has descended in what they're capable of, and none of that has changed. I don't know that winning this changes that for everyone after this one. So that's something to look at. That's something to think about going through this. I think SKC are off this weekend as well, so a chance for them to get rested going into the stretch run in MLS. In Canadian Championship action, TFC came in trailing 2-1 against Forge. They won 1-0, so they won on away goals at BMO. It was an oddly physical, maybe not oddly. These two teams don't like each other at this point. It has been made evident there is some regional rivalry. Forge have come after this team, obviously winning that first leg. Insigne gets the winner. After that, he runs over to the bench and he does this celebration. If you're not watching, you can go to YouTube and watch us, or maybe we'll clip it out and put it up. But he does the celebration of like clown that I'm listening to. Bobby Smirniotis said he did it to the bench because he had gotten in an argument with the bench off a tackle near the bench, that he got in a little bit of a fight with one of the Forge players, and then he apparently turned and was saying some stuff. Smirniotis said it wasn't really directed at me. Apparently John Herdman didn't shake his hand after the game, so some of it was probably directed at him. We know obviously the drone rumors that we've heard now coming out of the first leg in Hamilton as well. So this game was pure Canadian Championship. This is what you want to see. Get your Timbits out, get locked in, and get ready for something like this. And TFC are able to hang on to the 1-0 victory. They now will travel to Vancouver, who knocked off Pacific 1-0. Ryan Gauld, an early goal in this one, 13th minute. And unfortunately, Brian White gets hurt right after that. He gets beamed in the face with a ball. His head hits the turf underneath him, and he's immediately subbed off. So we're hoping for the best for him. Mm-hmm. And Damir Kreilach came on in his place. And Vancouver able to hang on 1-0. They were never really in doubt. They were never really pressured by Pacific. And now we get this matchup again. I think this is 3 straight years of Toronto against Vancouver in the Canadian Championship. Vancouver have won it twice. Can I do the thing? If John Herdman wins this, is this a good first year for him? If Vanni Sartini wins this, what does it mean for him 3 years in a row?
First of all, I think we should reserve, like, you should be noting when John Herdman shakes the hand of the other team's coach. Like, I feel like it's noteworthy when he does at this point, because
the absence of it is not noteworthy because it more often like, doesn't happen.
That should be the assumption at this point.
Does shaking a hand does a New Jersey handshake count where you just go and bump someone while they walk by
you? What do you say? F you. Yeah. See you at Thanksgiving. No, yeah. So, like, look, I think that this would be, like, again, like, teams have different barometers or different stages of either rebuilds or builds or whatever you want to call it, evolutions. Toronto FC, if they win Canadian Championship and sneak into the playoffs, like, that's an A+ season from where we were sitting this time last year. This was the lamest of lame duck teams last year. It was a joke watching them down the stretch. When John Herdman was named head coach over last fall, but like when he was really taking over in the winter. Oh, by the way, it was so bad. And John Herdman was like, "Oh, I'm named head coach on August 30th or whatever it was. I'm not going to start until after the season. I'm not taking these L's on my resume. This ain't my team. Terry Dunfield, this is your team. Sorry, bro." And then they lost almost every game down the stretch. Where this team was looking in January, February was, oh my God, they're going to be 15th. This is just a transition year. Take your punches, survive in advance, be building towards something. A positive year would have been, hey, we have something here. We've gotten a couple contracts off the books. We have the semblance of a core going forward, or at least pieces that could be part of the core. Like, if they were to win a trophy and make the playoffs, that would be ahead of schedule in a transition year. I think that'd be excellent. When you go to Vancouver, like, winning this would be really big for them as well, and getting back to the CONCACAF Champions Cup. Like, if they're in the CCC for 3rd year in a row, that's really impressive of Vancouver. Now, the difference between them and Toronto in this scenario is, like, it should be celebrated if they were to win this trophy, but, like, Vancouver's season is going to be defined by if they win a playoff round. And that's just where they are in their evolution, and that's complementary to them in the sense of, like, yeah, their expectations are higher. They should be higher. Like, what are you building towards? And my fear and my critiques of this team all summer were, I just don't think that they're anywhere close to the top tier in the West, and, like, even the middle tier. Like, I have Colorado over them. Like, even we were being super critical of Seattle. If Seattle played Vancouver in a playoff series right now, who would you take? I think I'd take Seattle.
Yeah. I don't know about that. I think
Okay.
I'd be split 50-50. I don't know. Well, I guess it depends, like, which round, so who gets home games and whatnot.
Right. Right.
If Vancouver got the home game, or 2 of 3, which is ridiculous, I think I might take Vancouver.
Yeah. I mean, well, true, fair, right? And like home field plays, but like that's kind of my point. Is that like we were just crapping on Seattle and saying
Yeah.
like you should not look at this team. It's like I think that they're slightly ahead of Vancouver, and again, like that's easily argued. Like if you say the other, but my whole point is that like this is what this team has been for 3 years. Are they going to take the next step, or are they just going to continue to be like this? Like same thing, taking the next
Yeah.
step counts in the Concacaf Champions Cup as well. Can they make a run there? I don't know. So
And
like
it's-
that's where I'm at with Vancouver. Like yeah, like winning a trophy should always be celebrated first and foremost. I want to continue to come back to that because that's why we do this. That's why we're all here. But Vancouver's season is not defined by winning or losing the Canadian Championship final this year. Their season is defined by what they do or what they don't do in the playoffs.
I think you're right. And I think Vancouver sort of said that 2 years ago where they were like, this is a great first step. Saying first step means there's other steps following. And it's not, you're not going to continue to just do that every year. And I think it goes in the CONCACAF qualifying part of it to the convo we had about Philly last week, where it's like, do you even really need, like, you don't get a ton of money to get into this competition. You have failed to be competitive in that competition. Obviously, you want to put yourself on the biggest stages against the best teams, but for what end at some point for Vancouver? If you have no ability to contend at that level and you don't choose to make it a part of your season schedule in which you're going to put all your chips in and fight for the opportunities to get into a semi and a final.
Yeah, and again, and I understand the logical, intellectual path that comes down, right? But like, it's like I was talking to Doyle about this, but with the Colorado Rapids on Extra Time on Monday, and after that conversation, like it's obvious to me, it's like yeah, obviously you always want to play in Champions League, like that's what. I got a call from like another like a CSO at another club. They're like, yeah, I was listening to that. They were like, you know what in the hell? Like, why was that even a question, right? Like, we all want to play in the Champions League. Like, we like again, like we get it. Like, it's gonna stretch our roster thin, but it's like every single team is desperate for this. Like, every team that has ambitions, at least, or even mild ambitions, like you want to play in this competition. So I understand the like conversation point of, well, will it harm the season? Like, none of these teams are thinking of it that way. All of these teams want to be in this competition because it's continental competition. You get to play against the big teams in Mexico. You get to play against the big teams from Central America. All of this, like, yes, it could come detriment to the beginning of your season next year, but a lot of these teams would rather try to figure it out than to be like, well, it's no big deal if we don't make it.
I think detrimental to me is different from the fact that like they're not competitive.
Sure.
Like that's the part that's really hard with all of this is just not putting a competitive product on the field in these moments. And like I don't know if that's season planning of like coming in and hitting the ground running versus okay, we're slowly going to build for the year,
Yeah.
or if that's purely based on roster spend. And,
Or,
like, the
or
inability
getting
to
Tigres in the
compete.
first round.
Yeah, for sure.
That's unfortunate.
But they got LAFC and they lost 6-0
yeah.
in 2023. So
Yeah.
that's like not acceptable. That's not competitive. And that's not even who the team is in MLS most of the time. Although they have had some crazy games against LAFC.
I was going to say, not against LAFC. Like, that's who they are.
Yeah. On the Herdman side of things, I think you said it, like from where they were a year ago, this is where Vancouver was 3 years ago. This is year one of a project. Winning something in year one, bringing a trophy home, getting yourself into that competition, being able to get yourself on that stage, that's a big deal. This is a team that's locked in with Insigne and Bernadeschi. They might as well try and win things. There is no reason to say, like, this is a future build. Bernadeschi is on the books through 2027. Like, you are stuck in this, and they both played well this year. So why
yeah.
not continue to try and push things with them in this group and try and be competitive? And so, yeah, it would be nice for this team to win in year one. And I will say, for the Whitecaps, they have made this a huge moment over the last 3 years. Like, they get...
Yeah.
They didn't for the semifinal, but they have built out the finals for big crowds, big atmospheres. They've made it feel like a big game, and they have performed. And if you do that in front of that crowd, your hope is they keep coming back. But the problem is, if you keep bumping up against that next wall, you're going to lose that momentum in your market. And I think that's what Vancouver has been struggling with, and that's been the question mark. But this is going to be a fun final. Once again, it went to shootouts 2 years ago. Last year was Montreal, so that was my bad. Vancouver hosts Montreal last year. 2 years ago, it was like the week I think Insigne signed. He went straight to Vancouver, and they ended up going to a shootout. Bob Bradley was coach at the time, and it was a pretty electric game and a pretty electric atmosphere. And I think we'll be hoping for the same in this one. TFC hosts DC United this weekend, and Vancouver play Austin this weekend, which I think will be a really fun game as well. This was Vancouver's first competitive game in 20 days because they lost in Leagues Cup, and my guess is they were matched up against LAFC in MLS play this weekend, and that one got moved, and so they didn't have an MLS game over the course of the weekend, and they were off for 3 weeks, which is brutal, and that's one of the really tough parts about Leagues Cup and the way it is set up. All right. Let's move into our favorite part of the show. Let's go into the ice cream shop. I'm already sweating, even though it's like 10 o'clock in the morning here. The humidity just seeping through into me. So cool me off here, Tom, and give us the scoops.
Yeah, let's start with one that's done. Tanner Tessman officially signed with Lyon this week. I really love this move. I'll start with the details. $6 million Euro transfer, so it's like 6.7 million US. Venezia holding a 10% sale on as well. This is Venezia's club record sale, and the only reason it wasn't double is because his contract was expiring in a year. So the idea was that he was going to leave this summer. All part of, like, Venezia were desperate to re-sign him to a new contract, but like understood why he was ready to move on, particularly with all the teams that were interested. I love the fit in Lyon because they really, really want him. They presented a plan in terms of like showing that desire and showing where he fits. Like Nemanja Matic is on that team, so he can play with Matic, but like they're like, yeah, you're also like going to be his long-term successor kind of thing, right? Like, so they see minutes now and in the future, and I think that he's going to fit in France very well. He had, look, he could have went, so I'm trying to backtrack. What's the best way? There was a ton of teams, like a lot of teams in Italy in particular.
We've done a couple of them.
Yeah, but like, so the interest was there. Like, all of that was real. But what would happen is, like, Inter Milan agreed a fee with Venezia, and any deal was contingent on him being loaned, and particularly trying to push him to be like to stay at Venezia for another year. Tessman, like, respectfully was like, I don't like, if I'm leaving, I want to leave, and like I don't want to go on, like, sign for another team, just go on loan somewhere else anyway. And that was a really big sticking point. So that's where that one fell through. Fiorentina and Roma were in for him. Fiorentina agreed to terms with Venezia, and like, the way it was described to me is that like their contract offer was like a joke, and then like when like Tessman's camp countered, they just never got a reply, and then all of a sudden they see like reports that they signed another center mid or something like that, and same thing. Roma was in, but like kept dragging their feet and like opened the door for Lyon to come in, and they sealed it really quickly. So that's another like point in the pro column for Lyon, is that like they were an adult, professional, serious club who said, we want to sign you, agreed a fee, and then pretty quickly agreed personal terms with Tessman. So, like, at the end of the window, I'm sure it was tough for Tessman and how drawn out this has been and kind of start-stop. But, like, I think this is the best. Like, I think this is significantly better than him going to Inter Milan because, one, you'd be loaned out this season. Not going to be a starter for them immediately, even next year if you come back. So, like, kind of what happens to your career there. Fiorentina would have been cool, but, like, they're always kind of instability, and like I just really like this move to Lyon. What do you think, Gus?
I agree with you. This feels like a stable place to go. Top 6 or 7 team consistently in France. They're in Europa League as well, so they'll have extra matches for you to be able to get your opportunity to get in. Signing with a team and not being sent out on loan is, I think, ideal at this point, right? Tessman's gotten his minutes. He has gotten experience in Europe. So he is not at the spot where he just needs to get on the field. And now he goes to a place where he can be there and fight for his spot over the course of the year. If he doesn't play this year, that's a different conversation. Now you open up the door next year and say, okay, maybe a loan makes sense, at least half a year, something like that, to try and get some minutes. But get an opportunity to come into a club that wants you and fight for that spot, and a club that I think has a clear, cohesive style that he can fit into and play inside of. So I agree with you. I think this is an ideal finish for him, and like this would be huge if Tanner Tessman ends up being a starter at Lyon week in and week out. That is a massive jump for him in his career, and that's a massive jump for the USMNT player pool to have a player like that at that position being able to get consistent minutes at that level would be a huge bonus. And this is, by the way, sort of what I talk about where I say don't talk about golden generations. There are a lot of good players all across the place that are finding their own paths in their careers, and there is a lot of avenues right now for players to be successful. I don't think Tanner Tessman 4 years ago was the guy that you said, well, the whole U.S. men's national team hinges on him. And in a year, you could be saying this guy's a starter because he starts week in and week out for a high-level league on side.
Yeah, I completely agree. And like his career path of he spent only a season at Dallas. He won minutes pretty straight away. Like I remember talking to people at the club like before the season started. It was like a day before they announced Tanner Tessman's like homegrown deal, and I was like, all right, like tell me who's coming out of the second team that we should be that has like legit like pro potential, like MLS potential. It's like, dude, it's Tessman. Like people like I got that line from a couple people, or just like the way that it was delivered. It wasn't like maybe it was just like no, we want to talk about Tanner Tessman. And then he quickly proved that he was good for MLS. And then the Venezia move, like I didn't know if that was premature or not. He wasn't playing a ton. Like he wasn't like a bench player in their Serie A season, but like he really blossomed when they went into Serie B, and like particularly last year had a breakout season. So that's been really cool. On to the next one. Goss, I'm gonna ask you. How's Christian Oliveira doing at Toluca?
It's a big move. That's a big move in the landscape of the sport. It's why a lot of people are talking about it, Tom.
It was super nice that they let him play for LAFC last night.
It was. I thought that was actually really kind of them, yeah. It is it's my journalistic ethics to have to say in this moment that it's going to be a big transfer when it happens.
So yeah, Christian Oliveira staying at LAFC. There's a reason why I haven't said anything about
Mexican League window, though. You said open another week. It does.
I mean, so it's funny reading the reporting that's gone out, like of Toluca are telling people that it's done, just needs a medical, and then all of a sudden last night it was like, oh, actually LAFC asked for more money. It's like, well, I thought you thought it was done, and so that doesn't compute. So just between that and Bogusz. Like, the Oliveira one was a little different because, like, there was a lot of steam with that. Even I was confused because I was asking sources. I was like, is this real? It's like, not saying that nothing's going to happen, but, like, nothing's imminent. It's like, that's why he was playing regular big minutes in the Leagues Cup final and then, obviously, in this game as well. But the Bogusz one is just like, oh, yeah, Celtic are interested in Mateusz Bogusz. And, like, I've got people asking me, it's just like, dude, do you guys think that Celtic has the money for Matty Bogusz? Do you think that LAFC want to let him go right now at the end of the season when they cannot replace him? Like, use some deductive reasoning here. And then, coincidentally, Celtic just signed a winger and attacking with something to that effect. It's like, oh, that was pretty clearly, like, Celtic. Oh, like, look, we have another target over here. You should agree to our terms. Like, that's, like, this stuff happens all the time. And that's kind of all I wanted to point out with this. Like,
do you feel like you took your victory lap enough? Or do you want do you have a couple extra yards in you?
No, that's it.
Okay. Can I actually say this?
No.
This is an exciting development for MLS that the fake mystery move is now outbound instead of inbound. Like, seriously. It used to be, oh, well, I don't know, Steven Gerrard might sign in the MLS. So if you want to offer him something, it has to be bigger, hence fake team, and then we do an LA connection. The fact that it's the other direction where it's like, oh, you think we want your player for our Europa League or Champions League run? Well, we might sign an LAFC player instead, so you better lower your offer. Hell yes. Let's go. That actually got me hyped. I am here for this.
Good spin.
Thank you.
I love where your head's at.
PR through and through on this one. Justice for Major League Soccer fake outbound moves going forward. Sorry to Frankie Amaya for not being able to play with Kike Oliveira. I'm sure that's the whole reason that he went down there. Speaking of hacks, Tom, is Miguel Almiron going to Fulham?
I don't know. I mean, the reports are that they considering it, and then reports out of England today said that they're not going to make a move for Miguel Almiron. So it looks like Miguel Almiron is staying put at Newcastle. And what if MLS's transfer window was aligned with Europe's? Like, would Newcastle really turn down, like, again, the initial bid was 10 million plus, I believe, 2 million in add-ons for Almiron from Charlotte. Would they really turn that down right now when it's clear that no other offers are coming in? Like, there's a real scenario in which Miguel Almiron is playing for Charlotte FC in like a week if the transfer windows were aligned. Yeah.
You wrote this piece up, I believe, for Give Me Sport. We talked about it a little bit on the show a few weeks ago while you were still working on it. And I think the synopsis of what you came back with was not only would it be helpful, but it is very possible that U.S. soccer could split the 16 weeks of windows that they have in a different way to make this work.
Yeah, so MLS CSOs are really, really pushing for it. A lot of people I talk to, on background, and then quotes have come pouring out from Chris Albright, from Zoran Kraneta, from Kurt Schmidt, and like, David Lee I spoke to before the window, and he was kind of saying something similar. That like this is a really big issue, and this is something that needs to be changed, and there was a lot of momentum for it to be changed. The league's official response to me was that they are working towards finding a solution on this end to change the windows to be so right now it's 12 weeks in the winter for the primary, 4 weeks for the summer, which is the secondary. That was my understanding of that's how it had to be. Your primary window had to be 12, and your secondary had to be 4. In recent years, FIFA would allow teams to do an 8-week primary and 8-week secondary. And again, with all of these rules, it has to be under FIFA. So FIFA stipulates that the transfer window can only be 16 weeks. And FIFA now stipulates their primary window has to be at least 8 weeks. So what you could do is a primary winter window of 8 weeks and then a secondary window of 8 weeks. And that would solve this issue. So again, I was told that MLS is working towards this end, but it's not just an MLS decision. First of all, it would be a U.S. Soccer decision, as you indicated. And U.S. Soccer, when I requested a comment, said, like, there's been no official proposal or anything, but, like, we would absolutely be open to this discussion, right? Like, it seemed like they weren't going to put up a fight. USL, same thing. Like, that's what they told me. Canadian Premier League already changed the window for the Canadian clubs this year. They kind of did it without MLS knowing. They did it without Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, like being aware that it was in the works. And that's why the Canadian transfer window closed a week before the MLS clubs, the American MLS clubs did, sorry. And that's what a big hurdle is going to be. That Canada Federation has to take into account what the Canadian Premier League wants. And that's fair. And I believe it would look like the Canadian Premier League wants it to close even earlier, which doesn't make a ton of sense to me because this league isn't exactly spending transfer fees at all, let alone, multi-million-dollar transfer fees, right? Like Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal would do, in theory. Again, easy jokes here about Montreal and Vancouver to be made, but you get the point, right? So I hope that a solution is found. It's not tenable to be like, well, screw you, Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to change it for the United States because it's better for a league. Like, you can't have it closing on August 7th for Toronto, but, like, September 2nd for Charlotte, right? That's just not fair. So one proposal that I had, like, you could make the window January 31st to March 27th, the primary window, and the secondary window July 8th to September 2nd. So that gets you an extra 10 days, and this year that was 2 or 3 games for every team for their signings to come in. But it also gets you to September 2nd, because like Zoran Kraneta said this in an interview about it'd be really beneficial too if we stayed open a day or two later than European League. So for everybody who thought they were going to get a deadline day move that never materialized, there's even better deals and there's even more acceptance of I think Kraneta talked about Chelsea. It's like what would they loan Raheem Sterling or something like that, right? Like hypothetically speaking, like after everything else is closed, and like that's the argument. And I'm firmly in favor of this, and it's just about whether or not all the agreements can be reached across the stakeholders that have to decide on this.
The other thing in there as well is MLS, you can still sign free agents, but your roster building is not in a way in which you leave a spot open for a free agent. But if the window closed in the Big 5 leagues in Europe and some of these other leagues or across UEFA, and you still have a day or two to sort of figure things out and say, oh, Swiderski got an offer, now we can go find this free agent, or we can make another move, or that offer didn't come in and we can see where our roster stands. It just gives you a little bit more flexibility, even in the free agent space, to make a move that makes sense inside of your roster build. And going back to the Bogus joke and like all of that, MLS has started to work its way into a space where even if it's not the first idea, clubs know that these players can come in and make a difference, and they can look at things and say, we didn't get the center back we wanted. What about Miles Robinson? We didn't get the winger we wanted. What about Mateusz Bogus or Kike Oliveira? And that's a spot where then you can upcharge, get a little bit of money, especially for teams in the bottom half of MLS standings where you look at it right now and say, we're not going to make an MLS Cup run. Can we make $8 million on a sale or $6 million on a sale and flip that for someone who we think can be a difference maker for us in the offseason coming up? You'd also add, with the way the other leagues are set up, you don't need that space in the primary transfer window. No. Most moves in MLS primary transfer window have already been agreed to before you get there and don't need that full open space to get done, and you lose players for preseason for a lot of
Yeah.
times because it's open so long.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like they don't need that month from March to April. It's just kind of there because like, hey, we can have the window open for that.
Yeah.
Like, why not, right? Like this year was a little different. Like Hernan Lopez went to San Jose like right before the deadline,
Right.
which was, but like that's abnormal. The typical cadence, as you said, is that things are done before that. Like it is very rare for a club record signing to be happening in mid-April. Like Cincinnati had to fight tooth and nail for Shakhtar to let Kevin Kelsey leave. Kevin Kelsey played like 100 minutes for Shakhtar, and it's like, well, we can't replace him because it's April. And it's like,
Right.
replace what? The 100 minutes that he played in December? Like, so it is like, so not only do teams not plan for that, it's difficult to get deals over the line in April for signings. But yeah, and it's a big issue. I do hope that, like, it seems like there's a lot of momentum for it to get changed, and hopefully it does for 2025. But obviously, nothing's guaranteed.
We've still got 2024 here. Any last things we
Yeah.
should be thinking about going into tomorrow?
Yeah. I'll be quick on a few of these. Bournemouth have bid for DC United U.S. Youth International center back Matai Akamboni. I was told that bid was well below DC's valuation, but it was, I think, technically the first formal bid. I don't know. Like Bournemouth have been interested, and you know, DC has been very aware that Bournemouth is looking at Matai Akamboni. If a deal were to get done, agreed before the window closes tomorrow, he would stay at DC for the rest of the season because he's 17. He turns 18 in October. That'd be super interesting. Another DC United homegrown youth international, Kristen Fletcher. He is in England right now. He's doing his medical today on Thursday ahead of a loan move to Nottingham Forest. He'll, 99.99% be with the second team, and he'll start there. Like he was with Swansea's second team last fall. He was excellent for them. So let's see if he can kind of do it with another move up, because Nottingham Forest are in the top U21 league, sorry. So they'll play Liverpool U21s, Manchester City U21s, et cetera, et cetera. So
Big
we'll see.
U21 games.
Let's see.
Tom,
We'll
let's
see.
do live streams. Let's do live watch-alongs for the U21 games.
But yeah, it's a super interesting player, and that'd be a cool move, and we'll see if he can kind of make his way through Nottingham, or what else would happen after that. And the loan deal would have a purchase option. A couple others: Tyler Miller to Swansea. That's been agreed as far as I know, but like work permit, I don't know if it's likely or not. So we'll see what happens there. DC United, Swansea obviously have common ownership, so that's the connection there.
Swansea
Two more.
just not have enough goalkeepers, and they're like, we have one across the pond. You can grab him.
It's very, very interesting to me. Another one, Nick Marcanic, the USL Championship runaway Golden Boot leader, will likely to join CD Castellón, a Spanish second-tier side, in the winter. I was told that their deal is very, very close, but he would stay with Charleston Battery for the rest of the season. He's one goal away from the USL Championship, a single-season goal record. He's got plenty of time to hit that. Again, he has 24 goals. Second place in the Golden Boot race has 14. So it is a historic season for Nick Marcanic. And then lastly, I'm getting word. Keep an eye, like a lot of these. Oh, sorry, Caden Pierre to Genk is something that's happening. Sorry, I forgot about that. That should be announced at some point soon, I'd imagine. A lot of these are smaller players or younger players, whatever, right? Like, I was told that there's a pretty senior, significant player in MLS that a move could happen over the next 36 hours or whatever. So stay tuned to my Twitter if that kind of comes through. But yeah, I was under the impression until late last night that this was just going to be, Caden Pierre, Christian Fletcher, Matai Kamboni. Like, these are the deals I was going to be focusing on. And there might be a significant one still to come, but we'll see.
That is the ultimate cliffhanger from Tom Boger to keep you on the edge of your seat. I will say the Nick Marcanic thing is cool. Like, it's cool that Charleston, first of all, Charleston Battery have been unbelievable under Ben Pierman. Like, they won the championship last year. This is going to be, I think, the third straight year they have a Golden Boot winner or the Golden Boot finalist. They have continued to rotate those players in and out as well. So they've done a fantastic job, and this is a big sale to a Segunda team to be able to get that money. In the Discord, there's a bunch of conversation today about MLS teams, should they be watching USL more and all of that. MLS teams know who Nick Marcanic is, and they kind of know the price on what they're spending on center forwards. It's not a guarantee that he would succeed. I think some of the things that has been good for him in USL is the change in physicality and speed of play. MLS is a unique league in that way, and just because someone's successful somewhere else doesn't mean they'd be successful there. And I think that's kind of one of these moves. And that's a lot of the success Charleston have had with the players they bring in, which is tough. But Fidel Barajas, it worked. Diego Luna, it worked. So you have to go look at it player by player and piece by piece. Let's finish out. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I just want to add one more thing. CD Castellon, I forget what semblance of the ownership, but it's Haralabob. You know that name? The former Dallas Maverick front office. He's like a data wizard. He's the one controlling this team, and he's using his like analytics model. And so for that to come up as he identifies, or the model at least identifies Nick Marcanic as excellent value and somebody whose stats and skills and abilities will translate from USL Championship to the second tier in Spain. I think that's a super interesting subplot, and we'll see if that kind of helps pave the way for more, in prime players to come from USL to go to Europe. Like there's been several that have gone to lower leagues in England or elsewhere in Scandinavia or whatever, right? Like that would be a super interesting additional pathway.
Classic Tom, games played on a spreadsheet. That's the only way he sees the sport, is numbers, X's, and moving pieces and lines over and over. Let's talk the weekend. As I said, a good weekend of games. We got Cascadia Cup. You've got a Western Conference final rematch, LAFC against Houston, Charlotte against Atlanta. Nice little spice in that one down south. And then Columbus NYCFC, which I put down here because I actually thought this was the best Leagues Cup game that I watched in total, but I thought it was definitely the best game that Columbus played. I think that NYCFC hurts Columbus in a way other teams in the East can't really. Their ability to play in tight spaces and play through Columbus's counter press, that's what allows them to get out in transition more often. And people watch Columbus and they say, oh, they throw numbers forward, just play direct, they're weak physically, and you can beat them. LAFC weren't able to do that, and they are probably the best transition team in the league because Columbus counter presses really well. They force the ball where they want to, and their backline knows it's coming, and their rest defense is very, very good. And so the better way to beat them, which most teams cannot do, is to play first through that first line of counter pressure, and then you have numbers going in transition, and then you can attack and create some more danger. NYCFC, if they had put their chances away, I think they would have won that game in Columbus in Leagues Cup. And so this is the game that I'm tuned into because I think it's going to be really fun to watch. Columbus somehow gets the win against Philadelphia. Midweek, rotated team coming off, I assume, a decent amount of champagne and Ohio-located beers that have been celebrated over the last 3 days, and they were still able to get the win at Philadelphia. This is going to be a much tougher test for this team.
Yeah, but to your point is they'll probably have their first choice 11 back ready to start. So, again, the fact that they were able to get the 3 points against Philadelphia on the road, when a game that Philadelphia played well, just straight up, they played well. Those are the kind of results that keep you in a Supporters Shield race that, like, at the end of the season, it's not always how do you perform against Cincinnati, Miami, LAFC, the Galaxy. Like, not dropping those points is where the Shield can be won or lost. You look at Cincinnati, I think, lost their Shield race right before the Leagues Cup. They lost 3 straight games, none of which were to heavy hitters. I don't believe it was Chicago was one of those games. Sorry, I forgot, it's too many games. But you get my point. Like a 3-game losing streak in June or early July that upended their season. They beat Miami 6-1. And that's when it was like, oh my God, here comes Cincinnati. They're going to take control of the Shield.
They proceeded to lose to Charlotte at home, Chicago at home, and at Red Bull.
Thank you. So yeah, it wasn't as bad as I remember in terms of the
not great
quality of opponents. Yeah, not great, obviously, but like Cincinnati should be expecting to win every game at home, right? But like again, that was only one team that was below the playoff line. But still, my point is that these are the games that trip you up in a Supporters Shield race. So Columbus. Getting 3 points there is a huge boost. They have 2 games at hand on Miami. They are 10 points below. Games at hand is never a guarantee that you're going to win them, but even if they do, they would be 4 points below after that. So they need to pick up every single point possible because Lionel Messi is back in training and will return for Inter Miami at some point soon.
10 points behind, 2 games in hand, and 1 head-to-head game. So you could argue if you can take care of your own business, you could pick up 9 points there, and you would need a gift from one other team to help you get over that line. You thought it would be Cincinnati last weekend. It wasn't, and that's like going to be a huge question mark down the stretches if anyone else takes points off this Miami team. As you said, Messi back into training. So that's going to be one I'm going to be locked in on. Obviously, based off our MLS watchability rankings, which we did last Thursday. So if you want to go back and listen to that, you can. We went through all 29 teams, where they stand in Tom's order, why, what we like watching about them, what we don't like. The big one we went in on was Portland. Like, they were the big mover of, They were second in our rankings, and they are not that high in the standings. And damn, they proved us right this weekend. 4-4 game against St. Louis, trailing 2-0 and 4-2. They pick up a red card, and then they come back and tie the game at 4-4. This game was off its rocker, and that's why Portland are fun to watch. They cannot defend, and their attacking talent is elite in Major League Soccer.
Bro, that was the quintessential Portland Timbers 2024 game. The fact that they tied St. Louis 4-4. And again, an Evander free kick, an incredible individual moment of brilliance. Like, everything about this game was Portland Timbers 2024. I think that they had, like, north of 4.4 expected goals, which is borderline unheard of, just by the nature of XG. To rack that up over 90 minutes. It was... What a fever dream that game was, and long live the Portland Timbers. I'm sure that Phil Neville and the coaching staff, I'm sure that the fans would prefer that they were, just a little bit better defensively.
Yeah.
But enjoy it while it lasts.
They are creating 3.5 goal chances per game, second in Major League Soccer. They have been ridiculous to watch. I have long called Evander my 2024 MLS MVP finalist. That was going back plus a year.
Yeah.
He's got 12 goals, 15 assists, tied for second in MLS. He's fifth in the league right now in goals chances created per 90. Is there a world in which he actually gets into the final conversation? What does this team have to finish, or what does he have to statistically finish for that to happen?
I think he's in the conversation. He should be in the conversation, right? Like, why wouldn't he be?
But can he finish top three?
Top three, that'll be tough, right? Because he just, Cucho should be there, like Chicho should be there. Look, Messi's going to get the votes, whether he plays, another game or not, because that just is what it is. Christian Benteke will at least be in the he won't. I don't think he would be top five, but these are some of the players. Lucho Costa, sorry, I forgot about him. Puanga, yeah. So it's going to be very difficult because of how packed this MVP race is this year. But Evander, at the very least, is firmly within this discussion, and I can't wait to see how his season evolves and ends.
I assume Felipe Mora is suspended off the red card from last game, so it'll be interesting to see, does Mason Toy get the start? Does Jonathan Rodriguez go up top? And, of course, this game against Seattle, it's very simple to say this is a must-win for Seattle. You mentioned it in the Open Cup conversation. This is all they have left, the regular season. For your fan base, this is the only way you can bounce back, is beat your rival, steady yourself in the league as well going forward. And the final big one that I mentioned for the weekend, LAFC against Houston, the Western Conference final rematch. You called Dennis Bouanga a cyborg on Tuesday. He doesn't need to rest. He didn't rest again, played the full 90, scored the goal on a penalty kick. So he will be on the field this weekend against Houston. That feels like an easy one to guarantee. But a Houston team that's playing good soccer, Miguel Ponce into the side, this would be a really fun one for them, I think, to go out and win and sort of establish we are different than we were last year, and we're a legitimate contender this year, and we should be treated as such. So this is a big match for Houston and a big opportunity for them as well. All right. We're going to be back on Tuesday to recap it all. We're going to be back on Tuesday to talk through some of the big transfers that finished. Whoever Tom's mystery person is, we will know at that time and be able to talk it out. Tom, anything else before I let you go?
No, that's about it. I will say that I hate myself for even doing the mystery thing. It sounds super hacky. I hated it coming out. But I figured that was worthwhile of a hint.
And we end on a high. Tom hating himself. We all love you. And we love you all for listening. Thank you all. Have a great weekend. And we'll talk to you again very, very